Of the Planning and Zoning Commission for March 22nd, 2023 will come to order. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we have the roll call, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence in memory of Chairman Spidell.
Amen.
And I received a text from Mayor Diesel this morning at 10:30. I'd like to read it to you. And I asked him if I could, and he said yes. I wanted to share with you all who cared so much for our friend Jane Spidell that this last week I named her winner of the 2023 Mayor's Community Spirit Award that names the mayor that he gets to name every year. I can think of no one more deserving in her desire to make a difference in our community and in the lives of those in the community. The bravery that she showed in her final days, still attempting to make that positive difference in lives, is beyond inspiring to me, way beyond inspiring. So Jane is the 2023 City of Titusville Mayor's Community Spirit Award winner.
All right.
Maybe we need to give her applause. Lori, can you call the roll, please?
Vice Chairman Richardson.
Here.
Secretary Grant.
Here.
Member Perez.
Here.
Member Aton.
Here.
Member Faison.
Here.
Member Garrod.
Here.
Alternate Member Childs.
Here.
Alternate Member Rogers.
Okay, we do have a quorum. Next item is approval of the minutes of March 8, 2023. Mr. Faison.
I move that we approve the minutes of March 8th, 2023.
Second.
Seconded by Member Aton. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Faison.
Yes.
Secretary Grant.
Yes.
Member Perez.
Yes.
Member Aton.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Richardson.
Yes.
Member Garrod.
Yes.
Okay. Looking at the agenda, there's no quasi-judicial confirmation procedures. There's no consent agenda. There's no old business. There's no new business. Petitions and requests from the public present.
Stan Johnston, 860 Poinsett Avenue. I'm addressing you as a professional engineer tonight, which I've done a number of times. And I've sent you an email today, and this is the email. It's 3 pages long, is what I wrote, and it's attached to some other emails. It was a series of emails. And it has to do with SNJ Oaks, a project that was approved by P&Z in July of 21. That's over 18 months ago. And at that meeting, I opposed it very much so, big time, because of what it was doing. It was giving a number of properties. There was a claim made by Peggy Bisaka and the engineer of record that houses on Mockingbird Lane were landlocked without legal access. And so I have a reference here. It's an email from Paul Anderson, our city fire marshal, which is included in this email. And it is an admission of guilt that the city of Titusville and the planning and zoning and city council have made a big error. And that's also a big error by our legal staff. And that is that Florida Statute 704 says that there's an access of necessity already provided for these people. And it also is in that same statute, it mentions that it's common law. So this is common law that prescriptive rights they have prescriptive rights to access their property. So it was not a small error, it was a big error. And upon this premise that the properties did not have legal access, is they were given only 8-foot access driveway, whereas the existing is a path plus an access of over 25 feet wide for the most part. So it limited, and it took away their turnaround. It's a dead end. So that's what has been approved by the city of Titusville. Unbelievable, unbelievable. It's so I've also filed an ADA complaint with the government against the city of Titusville and against P&Z and against council and against our legal staff. Why in the world? And I'd like to at least another minute to answer questions or explain to you. But this letter is not very nice. But it begins with saying, thank you for the meeting with Brad and Mark on March the 10th. So I'm asking for you to read this letter because it's serious violations of laws by the city of Titusville, P&Z, and council. And I'm asking for you to respond to this.
Is there a motion that be given an extra minute?
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to ask Stan a question.
Okay.
So Stan, you've been talking about S&J Oaks for quite some time.
Say it again?
You've been speaking on S&J Oaks for quite some time.
Yes, sir, over 18 months.
And in this case here, we're talking again about that right of way for those homes that are in, somewhere near that area.
Well, it's a prescriptive right.
Okay. So what is it that you want the P&Z council to do about this particular issue?
Well, I think that it would be nice to ask your legal staff to look into this matter and report back to you, because what it's asking them to do is it's very clear. It's Florida Statute 704. In fact, is you can also just punch it into your computer, Google FS 704, and it'll tell you the same thing I just said to you. It's statutes and it's common law, and also is that the city code for the city of Titusville requires a 20-foot driveway for a fire truck, according to Paul Anderson. And at that time, on July 21st, it was being given in only 8 foot instead of 20 feet. So it's a big deal. And right now, it's been expanded only 12 feet under current plans.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a motion to give him an extra minute?
Yeah, I'll give him another, I say we give him another minute.
Everybody agree? 1 minute.
Okay, thank you very much. I would appreciate you reading. I'll just read this one thing to you. There are properties that are not, these are not properties that are landlocked with no legal access. And they need to have the access, and it's taken away their turnaround, prescriptive rights. So the city is, I don't want to say what do you say, incompetent, negligent, but I think it's foolish for the city to disobey the laws. There are very clear laws that I have known for many years, and that in my practice of engineering. Thank you.
Any other petitions and requests from the public? Okay. Before we go into the reports, which is the accessory dwelling units that we're going to talk about, at the end of the meeting, at the end of the agenda, I'd like for us to spend about 2 or 3 minutes apiece and self-introduce ourselves, because we've got some new members, and that includes the staff and Lori. And as soon as we're finished with the agenda, I'll go into that. Accessory dwelling units discussion. Pardon me, I have a cough drop in my mouth. Eddie?
Thank you, sir. On February 14th, 2023, the City Council considered the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation to review the city's accessory dwelling unit ordinance for possible changes. The Commission specifically recommended considering changes to the minimum and maximum size of a dwelling unit, setback requirements, parking, and standards specific to the Indian River City Neighborhood Zoning District. Council approved sending this agenda item back to the P&Z for further inquiry and investigation over the next 6 months, looking at the possible effects on the neighborhood, acceptance of the neighborhood, and the commonality of implementation in all neighborhoods. Included for you tonight, we have 4 attachments. We have the Palm Bay Accessory Dwelling Unit Code, the City of Titusville's Accessory Dwelling Unit Code, an AARP model guide on standards for ordinances that allow accessory dwelling units, and then we have an ADU guide from the Florida Housing Coalition, which is also the webinar that I sent you all, I believe it was a couple weeks back now. They had presented to a wide audience on ways to incorporate accessory dwelling units into local codes. And with that, so this isn't an agenda item. There's no motion or action that's necessary tonight. This is more of a fact finding. We wanted to share this information and resources with you so that they were available to you. And then moving forward, if there is additional information or additional questions that we could help answer to bring back at a follow-up meeting to help answer some questions or provide some insights, we're happy to do that for you all. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions of staff? Mr. Faison, you started this whole issue.
I did. Well, first of all, thank you for putting some stuff together. Were you able to go through all of this information, and did it give you a new insight as to what Titusville can do going forward?
Yes, the most helpful thing to me, if you're looking for like kind of the highlights, was on page 90. There were some barriers that were identified. That I think there are some areas where our city code is a little more restrictive than what is being recommended by the Florida Housing Coalition. For example, the ownership, it says prohibition of non-family members from occupancy, as well as some of the size requirements. And so I think there's some ideas in here that could be used to make ADUs a little more flexible. As part of the research, I did want to share that we looked in our permitting history, the building permits, and unfortunately there's not a very clear way to see accessory dwelling units based on the permit type and the way that our software system is set up for permitting. But generally speaking, there's approximately 35 accessory dwelling units that we're aware of within the city, and we're typically receiving about 1 request a year. So we've received about 3 to 4 in the last three years. But actually our staff this week let me know that there's already been 2 new inquiries. I don't know if that's related to bringing this before the P&Z and getting a little more spotlight on it or what, or maybe just the high price of housing is making people consider this as an option. But did want to share that history and the demand in the city.
Oh, I've been driving around and looking at, I should say I've been driving around. While driving around, I've noticed that I've seen a house once with a door on the outside that looked like they may have removed a window, put a door there. So I think some people have done this already, not knowing it was an accessory dwelling unit and or may not have permitted. So another house that had like a detached garage that they put a walkway from the house to the garage, and then they closed the door and closed the garage door and put doors in it. So I think that there are more of these around our community that we may know, like you said. So they're there. I like the fact that we're looking at this and that we have somebody from the community that wants to speak on the topic as well. So I'd rather hear from them and hear what they have, because I've seen on the back of their shirts is tiny homes. So I love to hear from them and what they have to say before I say anything else.
If the members of the audience would like to speak on this agenda item, we would like you to fill out a card that's on the table over there and then hand it. Ideally, yes, but if one of you wants to get up and speak and fill it out after, you can do that too. But when you get up to the podium, say your name and address for the record, please. And if the other folks would like to speak, please do fill out a card.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Denise Lucas. I am a co-owner of Triple L Tiny Homes here in Brevard County, providing alternative housing for our community. Actually, we offer our services nationwide. I want to apologize because I honestly was here more to gather information than I was to give it. So, but I have questions, and one is we are a tiny homes on wheels builder, which means they are not built on a foundation. They're not permanent. We do not build permanent on the foundation. It's on wheels only. So I wasn't sure, and maybe my question should be directed to you before the council, because I would like to learn more about what you are trying to offer to the community of Titusville and how we may be able to fill that niche. We are Northern Boulevard building, and we're a new company. We are NOAA certified, which is the National Organization of Alternative Housing. We build to Florida building standards. We build national building standards. We are inspected rigorously throughout our builds, as well as a final. We have something to offer to Titusville, but it just needs to be, I guess, maybe a little bit more fact-finding, if you will, on the benefits or how it maybe would or would not affect Titusville on wheels. So if you would be willing to maybe allow us the opportunity to talk with you, I would appreciate that. Absolutely. And I'm sorry I wasn't prepared because I didn't know. So thank you.
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
So far, how has business been here in North Brevard?
Well, as a new business owner, and my husband's done home improvements and built homes his whole life, just getting started, honestly, I would say it's slow. And what our struggle is we've had many opportunities to sell. We sold our first tiny home in Volusia County in Port Orange post-hurricane because they lightened up their restrictions and they were allowing that alternative housing on people's lots. So that opened the door for our first sale. We've had a few people wanting them here in town for the use of their elderly aging parents. And they needed them to be close. They wanted to be able to care for them, but their parents still had the ability to take care of themselves, but not wholly. So they wanted it as a temporary solution to be there for their parents. So we've had the opportunity, and to be honest, where we're falling short is where to put them. There is a tiny community down south now in Rockledge, and we visited there, and it's a combination of built on foundation and on wheels. And I'm not 100% sure because we didn't visit it prior to the tiny homes, but they do have some existing like single wides there as well. And I think they're kind of weeding those out and trying to build a true tiny community there. But other than that, we have nothing in Brevard County, so I can see where it would definitely help some family members who may be struggling, maybe elderly. There's a lot of opportunity. Offices.
Well, one of the reasons why this kind of came up is that currently the regulation is that you have to have 2 acres and put 5 homes on 2 acres. Well, that's not an efficient use of property, and so we are now looking at ways to kind of mitigate that. Would you guys be considering to put them on slab, building tiny homes on slabs?
We've not discussed it because how we are certified is building on wheels. And that's something that we could certainly talk about and discuss, but it's not something that we have discussed thus far.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
No, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Mr. Garrett.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to comment a couple of things and maybe a precursor for introductions of our past experiences later. Going through the material staff provided, and I appreciated the ARP summary and model ordinances. Going back to a time when I was employed, the deal of what you're on discussing now, manufactured housing in general on wheels or tiny homes, modular housing, and then for Ms. Farrell, maybe she can help me a little with my memory. There was a lawsuit in which, in fact, the county I worked for got involved in, and it ended up being withdrawn, but it was following the city of Lynn Haven, Florida, in which they litigated exclusionary zoning for manufactured housing. The manufactured housing industry was behind that litigation. Over time, I think it's like something you put carpet over and it goes away. You don't see the dust under the carpet. A lot of local governments have just kind of not poked the snake's eyes regarding trying to rewrite their zoning laws to provide for manufactured housing like kind as a dwelling unit and stop exclusionarily zoning construction on site versus modular versus mobile homes, as they may be called, manufactured homes. When I was in that line of work, they were made in the same factory in case. And a lot of times the manufactured home and the modular home, they came on wheels, just one had a chassis the wheels were attached to and one did not. But when they were done, they were done. Ironically, looking through the model ordinance and looking through the literature and the other ordinances, I came here tonight to say I think the fundamental question, and you've been on this since I've got here, affordable housing and the initiative to try to accelerate affordable housing startups, either companies that would do it or individuals who would be desiring to do it. And then the barriers that are in the current city rule, the barriers that are in other city rules. And then when you read about how do you get these barriers out of your way, the barriers are, for example, and again, if Ms. Farrell will help me with this, I was going through this statute that got adopted at the end of my career, actually, and that was that they wanted to provide for accessory dwellings for family members, for invalid family members or aged family members, but also affordable housing in some of the communities in Florida simply can't afford to. The keys are going to, people drive 120 miles one way from Miami to work in Key West and go home. And I know people that do that. So this 2016 statute came up and says, you need to make this in your local ordinances. That's the short of it. It's interesting what they want you to do to bring the affordability issue back. In the section that I'll just read it and for purposes of it, it says if the local government adopts an ordinance under this section, an application for a building permit to construct an accessory dwelling must include an affidavit from the applicant which attests that the unit will be rented at an affordable rate to an extremely low income, very low income, or moderate income person or persons. That's the solution the statute provides for it that's addressing the issue. I think you keep focusing on how do you make these affordable. And this is on an individual person's basis. Working in a staff departmental capacity, that's a real challenge to have staff implement rules that have great ideas behind them, but difficult to say the least. You touched on, you saw a few that were constructed around here. You mentioned that there's 35, maybe you get one a year. I was kind of thinking that might be what it was. Funny, it was my guess. How many conversions of homes, be it detached buildings or enclosed carports or enclosed garages and all those subjects you mentioned, they probably more than one a year. Probably 50. There's probably a lot of those out there in neighborhoods if you scurried around and looked for them. People convert that for reasons, and then they rent it. And whether it's with or without building permits is always a moot point because it's possession's 9/10 of the law. They've got it. It's there. They're using it. It works for them. So my two bits of this is I think the fundamental question in the code's revision needs to pay bearing on the statute's attempt to have local governments create affordable housing through an initiative that, I don't know how you do that, but you force the owner to rent it at a low income rate. There's no profit margin there, I guess. If you're not renting it, which is one of the codes I ran across, that they won't let you rent it, or that the owner has to live in the house that has the accessory dwelling. Now, I'd like to be honest to say I think the probability of that being substantiated on a even an average basis of all homes that have accessory dwellings, how many of those actually have the owner living there and you don't have a realtor or a representative who's renting the house and the accessory dwelling too. And then the third part of my input would be I reading through those ordinances or model ordinances, and there's a tie-in or not a tie-in of utilities. Some would certainly have an opinion that if you unify the electrical and sewage and water to one home, you've got one owner, You got one bill. Let the renter, let the occupant work it out with the owner, how much water they use, or how many toilet flushes they used, or how much electricity they used. The reality in the building codes, that's a prohibited barrier. Homes like the home I live in was built in 1957. You couldn't build an accessory dwelling on its current electrical system. There'd be no way, and it'd be cost prohibitive for me to have the electrician come in and rewire my house to put my mother-in-law in the back room. And so all of a sudden, I cannot do it. And then if the code says you have to do it, you've just created a prohibitive barrier. So when you think about affordability, also think about the affordability initiatives and incentives you create for those. The statute says make sure you rent it for low income. Make it easy to do. Make it convenient for somebody to do it. Whether it's manufactured housing, it has wheels, or it's on a chassis, or it's on a pad, I think the real issue is it compatible with the neighborhood? You know, does it look like the homes in the neighborhood? Or does somebody pull up Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball's mobile home they drove across the country and towing it behind their station wagon? Nobody does that anymore. But they do, because they can take the tiny homes you're describing and you can hook them up and tow them like a fifth wheel. Is there really something bad about that? Or is it something you perceive? The perception being, well, I don't want mobile homes in my neighborhood. I mentioned that there was this case that in Florida you're not really supposed to have exclusionary zoning. Whether that's enforced, whether it's litigated, whether it just disappeared, as I analogize it to dirt under the carpet, that's something else. But the reality is it's out there. So I would say you look at the fundamental goal to create affordable housing and how do you incentivize it, and try not to create barriers to being able to do it, like thinking it's a good idea to unify electricity or that. It probably is, but it isn't necessary. And I think this relationship you have to size, I'm going to take a stab at this and help me if I'm on base or off base. I can probably guess I'll be off. Developer comes in, builds subdivision based on minimum zoning standards, lot size. He comes in and builds a home on the lot that's the minimum size, because the maximum number of lots is what his business is. And he puts the size home that fits the size lot. My humble opinion, and most likely you wouldn't have room if you had to meet all standard zoning setbacks to put an accessory dwelling. You could maybe enclose the garage, you could maybe add a bedroom on, and then you got the code where you had to have interconnectivity if you had an attached home, and I'm kind of at a loss of what that was supposed to accomplish other than it's a duplex in disguise. Again, the point is that these accessory dwellings, if you want to initialize activity towards that, make it reasonable, make it easy. If you're wanting neighborhood compatibility, look at percentages rather than forcing a standard. If it was I couldn't put, my two-car garage would be 400 square foot. I couldn't put a 400 square foot building on my property no matter what the rule said because of the setbacks. It won't fit. It just simply won't fit. And if it was to be 600, if 400 wouldn't fit, 600 would. But if I put something in proportion to what I had, say 10%, 15, 25, whatever that standard is, it makes it easier for the owner to figure out how to make it work. And at the same time, it's easier to allow the flexibility. It's whatever size fits your property and your home therein. You can imagine if I had a 3,000 square foot home, a 400 square foot granny flat would look a little bit out of balance. If I had a 3,000 square foot home and I had a 1,000 square foot granny flat, it would look at balance. It'd look like a 3-car garage. That's my 2 bits.
Mr. Payson? Okay. A couple of things I noticed when I've read this thing a couple of times, and also looked at the video that Eddie sent me. Thank you. It was about an hour and a half. There's a difference between tiny homes on wheels, they call them those, and what we're talking about in accessory dwelling units. Accessory dwelling units are usually site-built, and in some cases, I think Orange County and Osceola and Pinellas are examples, there's 0 lot lines, so setbacks do not apply. And I saw in some cases CUPs don't matter. They're non-existent in talking about accessory dwelling units. It seems like sometimes we get so caught up in CUPs that it takes the place of really zoning rules. And there was a time, I'm kind of deviating from the point, there was a zoning classification in Titusville called RP. And the example of RP zoning is in the back of what is the Searstown Mall right now, where you had retail on the bottom floor, professional offices on the bottom, and residences on the top. RP seemed to be a great example, and RP was frequently approved for zoning, but it doesn't exist anymore, as I understand. But looking at the way Orange County, Osceola, Pinellas, and there's some cases in Seminole County, they've adopted accessory dwelling units. The most, Orange County has produced, the city of Orlando has produced the most clear-cut accessory dwelling units and their standards. In cases of Orange County, you read that if the accessory dwelling unit is 500 square feet or less, the parking requirements don't come in. They're allowed to use on-street parking. They don't have to have their own parking space. But getting back to tiny houses, they're not the same as accessory dwelling units. And we can't mix them up. But I think we've got to talk about them separately, because I think tiny houses are, we need tiny houses, and we also need accessory dwelling units, because whether we want to admit it or not, the cost of housing is unaffordable to people that are teachers, people just starting off in their careers, and we've got to get this addressed. Now, you remember when we discussed the tree ordinance? We sent a group of people, I think it was Peggy, Jolyn Nelson, Dwight Severs, and I can't remember who else, over to Tampa to see what they did with their tree ordinance. I think we probably need to make a trip, including those same type of people and Eddie with them, to go to Orange County and see what they've done, the barriers that they've overcome, and how they're doing. Because, and I think it was Seminole County, if you look at the numbers, they're almost doubling every year, the number of ADUs. Well, it was in the presentation where she presented, she was from Seminole County, and Pinellas County had the same kind of rates. They were doubling every year. Like the last year was 81 accessory dwelling units. But it's a growing thing that we've got to face and get the council to face with us. Mr. Childs.
I was going to say on page 110 of our agenda is a nice little, explanation of differences between tiny homes and ADUs. And one of them is that ADUs are sometimes required or generally required to be on a foundation. But, I think that's, and there's some other things too, like tiny homes are generally less than 500 square feet. Tiny home can be an ADU in a backyard, but ADU has to have like a house that's already on the property. I guess that's one of the main differences, between a tiny home and an ADU. But I have an RV, and we try to get in. There's this one really exclusive place down in Florida Keys where you have to have a newer RV to even get in. You have to have like a Class A, and it has to have a certain certification. It has to it has the sticker that was built and it's certified by a certain builder. So that way they can make sure that all the RVs that are in there are really nice looking ones, right? So it's a way of like weeding it out, which I know like there's more than one person on city council is worried about. If we start letting ADUs pop up all over the place in my neighborhood, how's that going to look? And is there a way, that if we were to allow ADUs that are like tiny homes with wheels, is there a way that we could like require is there a certification on some of those that have that? Then we would like be like, all right, this is a nice looking 80 or nice looking tiny home. Is there? Can I? If you want to speak, if you could come up here and say your name and address.
We needed to fill
then a
out
card
that
afterwards.
form afterward.
Okay. My name's Matt Lucas. I'm other owner of Triple L Tiny Homes. But yes, we go have a certification. When it's all finished, we get an RV certification.
So it's like an RV. It's an
Correct,
RV
it is.
certification. It's what's it called? I can't remember what it's called.
You know the number.
Is it the the sticker that you use? It's like saying a NOAA.
NOAA certification,
Okay,
yes.
all right. Okay, that's kind of what I was thinking. All right.
Right.
But you have to have there's certain specifications you have to build it to in order to get that
Absolutely.
certification.
It has to
right?
go through the inspection, and at the final inspection, we get the certification.
Okay.
And it meets the ANSI code,
Right.
the ANSI, and I think that
Standards.
may be, yes, and I
It's
think
119.
several actually.
Yeah, but I think
But
that's on the sticker.
I do believe that is the sticker that you're referring
Yeah.
to when you were talking about wanting to go to that RV park and you're looking for a certain sticker
Yeah, I
and
think my
such.
RV has that, but it's not Class A. But yeah, it's Class
Yeah.
A. But yeah, okay. Yeah, I was just thinking because that kind of gets like that kind of covers, that it doesn't look bad. That you're not just bringing in, cousin Eddie's RV and he's emptying it into the sewer. You're getting a nice looking, newer built tiny home or mobile home or whatever you want to call it. But I think if we look to do something like that, I think that'd be a great way of making sure that aesthetically it's pleasing. That's all I'm saying.
Right, and our certification isn't so much about the aesthetics, in all honesty, even though they look like little cottages. You would not know that it wasn't a house, and it's built like a house, and it's solid, I mean,
Like how
Florida,
many
Florida
people-
building
yeah.
codes, we're not building to a RV standard, we're building Florida codes, right, and national codes, and electrical codes, and plumbing codes, and we're meeting all of them nationwide. But the ANSI is coming into the RV part. It's a certain width, certain height. We're able, if they need to move them, say they are moving and they want to move this with them. You don't see many tiny homes on wheels on the roads. People
Yeah.
are buying them and they're putting them on their property and they're staying.
But
This
in
isn't
ge-
for
yeah.
recreational
But in
use.
general, when you get that sticker, I mean, you've probably been around other people that have built them. In general, they're pretty nice looking, right?
They're
I mean, are
very-
there any that look pretty bad?
I can share, pictures
Yeah.
of our
Yeah, I
builds,
mean,
so
I'm
you
just
can get
saying,
the
like, in
idea, but
general,
they're
though,
nice,
it's a
yes.
nice way of, I think, saying, all right, this is not gonna look like, it's not gonna
Yes,
reduce the value of the
right, yes,
neighborhood.
sir, yes,
Yeah, yeah.
yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
thank you, thank you.
I
Thank
think, just give me a minute.
Sure.
I think the best example of the difference between ADUs and tiny homes is at the bottom of page 110. You've got it on your computer screen right now. You see the differences in the different rules and regulations that apply. I read somewhere in this that the difference between most of the tiny homes and the ADUs is some of the tiny homes are built using 2x4 construction, while the ADUs are 2x6 construction, and that's why converting a garage to an ADU is not permissible if the garage was built by 2x4 construction. Yeah. Mr. Garrod.
I wanted to speak on a couple of things you were talking about. And back in the day, recreational vehicle parks started to push towards having permanent residential units. Conversely, local governments wanted recreational vehicle parks to be transient. You had local governments with rules of occupancy, how long you could be there, and you had to move out and check out. You said you had an RV. The guy says you can be here 30 days, not 31. Or you can be here 179 days, you have to check out and move back in. When the park models came in, it kind of threw a dizzy at local governments because they were precluding permanent occupancy of an RV, but on the other hand, the park models, ergo tiny homes on wheels, were designed to be permanently affixed to the ground. They were designed to be what is referred to as hardwired and hard plumbed. They weren't an extension cord plugged in the side of your house. So as you think about compatibility architecturally, most of the tiny homes you see in the market right now look like what were park models. They're meant to look that way. They're meant to look like a home and not a mobile home that Desi and Lucy towed down the road. As you know, in some communities, it's a requirement in a lot of communities that mobile home parks have skirting around the mobile home, so you don't see the axles, you don't see the wheels. Everything looks nice and neat. Single wides, double wides, doesn't matter. Recreational vehicles, you see the wheels because they're transient. So as you look at developing rules, whether the codes, they're habitable, they're certifiably such, most of the local governments are dealing with this issue about how do we say no and say yes at the same time? How do we prohibit these things that are going to look like Desi and Lucy's mobile home, the one that's really old and falling apart they wouldn't let you in the park with, and how do we at the same time make them affordable? And the affordability is sometimes the difference between modular construction. If you really looked at the numbers, you probably can build a home for just a little bit more than you bought a modular home for. A modular home is not built like a mobile home. A mobile homes, manufactured homes, are like you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, it's got a different stud, different distance between them. It's Romex wired, it's not conduit. That's those subtle things you can't see unless you tear the walls apart. But if you're looking at longevity, one would probably argue conduit runs for wiring in a home are more resilient than Romex. And those components are in the codes right now, in the building codes, the manufactured housing industry codes. But it goes back to affordability. And I mean, honestly, I would think that the thing in the picture on page 110 that shows the wheels kind of an exaggeration, but if it were to be set up in like mobile home parks and you decided to say, well, we'll let you have these, but we want them to be skirted. So it looks compatible. That's an easy code. You have to skirt it. Somebody comes out to inspect it, the skirting's on it. If the skirting doesn't stay on it, that's a different issue down the road, but you make it look compatible. If you open it up to all the variations, site-built construction, modular construction, or in this case, tiny homes, they're all allowed as a dwelling. You are probably approaching the solution of making affordability an incentive. If I can do it and rent it, that's good for me. If I can put my mother in it, that's good for me. And if I can do it cheaply for me, that's good for me, so I'll do it. That's what I see some of this being.
I've been looking at the tiny homes for the last 6 or 7 years, especially when they appeared on YouTube. And they appeared on one of the channels on TV building tiny homes. And I think they can apply in parks of tiny homes. And we can do it where we have wetlands, if they're spaced properly to protect the wetlands, where you can't put a single-family home in the wetlands. Orlando is doing this around a lake. I think it's off of I-4 somewhere between Orlando and Orange and Seminole County, where people are living in there, not just transient, but they can move if they want to. But some people have been there for years and years. But it's something we've got to address. We've got to convince the council to address it too, because the affordability of homes in Titusville has gone out of sight.
I couldn't agree with you more. That I was just thinking in my mind, you look at Zillow and they break down your square foot cost for a home. And, pretty much 7 years ago, median price home in Orlando was somewhere around $125 a square foot. Now it's 200 and something a square foot. When you look at these tiny homes, if you make someone build a 600 square foot home, site-built construction, even if you own the land, which is not the principal cost, you're probably pushing $75 a square foot to build a 600 square foot home. Do the math, and you'll see how affordable is it. If you try to recover it on a rental income, you're going to be up against a wall. So you have to think about that baseline about, are these homes, and that's my opinion, are these homes an attempt to provide affordable housing? And that's the goal. That's how you write your rule. If you want to write the rule that somebody's mother is going to be ill and want to live with the son, that's the goal. You're not renting it. So you're the owner. They can't rent it. You don't make it rentable, frozen, or any of those statutory requirements. That's a goal. And I wasn't here for why the city council and the P&Z got the discussion going, but I have heard on the several meetings I've been to that affordable housing is the real subject, the meat and potatoes of the subject. And so the goal to write a code or rewrite your code targets affordability. That opens the door for tiny homes on wheels, that's site built, that's whatever comes up, size, relationship, and dimensions.
Mr. Aton.
So, as part of our early introductions, my family owned a mobile home park here in Titusville for years. So I'm very familiar with the mobile home park side, and we had a very small lot, and we couldn't put a regular mobile home on it. We looked at putting an RV, and you get into this whole, is an RV that's permanently on the lot an RV, or is it a mobile home park or mobile home, or what is it? And then there are park models, and it ultimately, I don't think we ever put anything on the lot because nobody could figure it out. I think we got to figure out what problem we're trying to solve, because my own personal opinion is accessory dwelling units is not that in my mind are primarily the granny flats, the backyards, the truly an accessory to a single family home is not the answer to affordable housing. I think tiny homes and tiny home developments very likely could be, but with the current regulations that we've got, it's not enticing to probably a developer to go in and develop the acreage, put in the plumbing, the electrical, the utilities at the density that's there to get it developed. Because the reality of all this is, if anybody's going to do it, it's a business and they want to make money. They're in it to make money. A developer that puts the utilities and stretches out and takes the risk to do it wants to make money. Putting regulations on them as to how much they can charge and all of that, I think it's just, probably in a lot of cases too scary. I think as it relates to building things that can get government subsidies to help make homes more affordable, whatever government, whether that's city, county, state, federal government that's doing those, does make a lot of sense and probably needs to be taken into account. But in my mind, and I've listened to the council meetings and understand, I think the crisis that we're trying to solve is affordable housing. I'm not sure looking at the accessory dwelling units is the way to go about that.
I think that's exactly what I'm trying to buy 2 bits worth is what's your goal? What's the goal you're setting? When I began, I read this statute that the legislature wanted to make this interwoven. I mean, it's black and it's white. It's what I read, unless they've changed it since I printed it. And that is why they did that. There was a push somewhere. Laws come from people. They had a push somewhere to try to integrate accessory dwellings with an incentive for the property owner that can make rent. He can make some money on it. When you talk about the zero lot lines, Mr. Chairman, that was also, I dare say I don't want to profess I know what I'm talking about. My experience was when you start putting these accessory dwellings, you get into the building code on separation between buildings. And then you're into the fire codes, and you're into portals, and whether it's a window and what kind of window it's. You can solve any problem if you try hard enough. Fireproofing, extra construction, price of the house goes up. Or you have to move it away, which is, I think it's from wall to wall, it's 8 feet, from eave to eave, it's 10 feet. But you get less than that, you get into a fire code issue. And then all of a sudden, you get told to move it over here. Well, I can't move it over there because I got a setback. And you spoke about the CUP. Now you're in, well, you can get a variance and then you can move it in. So when you think of what your goal is, affordability is not one facet. It's not price per square foot. It's, can I afford to do this on my land? I have flexible codes. And that's why I spoke about the fire codes. You can reduce a setback, but you have to change the construction type. It may be that you don't have any openings on that wall face where you've got less than the distance to the setback.
And do I get to a point where it's just more hassle than it's worth?
Exactly. Keep it simple, and make it available for someone to use the rule to benefit themselves and the person they're trying to provide. And then you've got a good rule, I think.
Mr. Payson.
Yes. So when talking about affordable housing, there are many facets of it. All right. So there's home ownership, there's rentals, and there's lots of different areas when we're looking at affordable housing. What we're looking for. So it's just not home ownership. There's also, like I said, there's rentals. And in the city of Titusville. So for example, I think 2 years ago, there was an article that was written that for every 10 mortgages that were written in the nation, one was being written for Florida. Okay, so then another one came out just after that Orlando was the worst in the nation for affordable housing. And when it talked about Orlando being the worst for affordable housing, they're talking about there were no rental properties available. In addition to the price of home ownership was just astronomical. So when we're looking at affordable housing, we're not just looking at home ownership as one. We're looking at rental for another. And again, I'll give my brother as an example. Just not too long ago, I was looking for the price of a 1-bedroom to rent here in the city of Titusville. A 1-bedroom. That's gone up since then, but it was $900. $900 to rent a 1-bedroom apartment. So recently, I went back to the old apartment that I used to live in, which is across the street from Jackson. In 2018, I paid $1,700 a month to rent an apartment, the one across the street from Jackson. Today, that same apartment rents for almost $2,000 a month. So when we're talking about affordable housing, right, I understand that there are a lot of barriers, but the first thing we have to do is just simply make it allowable, and then let the homeowner themselves figure out how they're going to make that happen. But when we talk again, when I look at affordable housing, I number one look at who lives in Florida. Oh, excuse me, who lives in Titusville right now? The people that live in Titusville right now can't afford the majority of the homes that are being built currently. The homes that are being built for those that are coming, that they're looking to come here. Cool. The people that are still here still want to buy. They still want to buy homes, or they still need a place to rent. So we still need to find a way, some way, whether it's ADUs, whether it's tiny homes. And like today's topic is ADU, not tiny homes, ADUs. So, and the question is, how do we make ADUs more attractive to those who live here now? And I think that's what we should be focusing on. I think that ADUs is a great alternative. And again, the word here is alternative to what we currently have right now, which is no places to rent. All the apartment complexes around here are full, okay? And they're expensive, okay? So I have a brother right now that's he's on a fixed income. He's on a fixed income. Luckily, he found a place to rent for $700 a month. That's lucky, because you can't find those anymore, okay? So we somehow, some way, so at least make it an option for the homeowner to do, and let the homeowner dictate whether or not this is something that they can do, or that they're not willing to do, or they're not able to do. So that's where I stand when it comes to ADUs. Eddie, I thank you for putting together this package today. It's a ton of information. That's why the first question I asked you was, did you learn something from this? And I'm glad that you did. I'm glad that you were able to see that there's some areas in Titusville that's kind of restrictive compared to what others are doing, and that we can incorporate some of those changes into into our regulations, if we so choose. And then we can go down and see what else that we can do to make it less restrictive, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I know that ADUs are not the solution to affordable housing, and tiny homes are not the solution. But we've got to find something, a combination of something, because whether we want to admit it or not, Orlando is moving eastward. There's a lot of people that work in Orlando, particularly East Orlando, that live in Titusville. He's one. And the rents are getting sky high. But we've got to find a solution, and this is a long-term solution. We're not going to solve it, but we've got to start thinking out of the box. Some of the things I read in here that communities are doing are like, for example, I think it was in the AARP proposal, they were saying building department will go from at the most 2 days, 2 calendar days to approve an ADU. They're given maximum of 60 days for the planning staff to approve them. That is unreasonable. At least we got to triple our planning staff, right? And so we need to think about some different solutions to the affordable housing. We're not going to be able to cap a rate. We'll hopefully get to slow the rate of rents. You keep pushing. I see you pushing the button, Mr. President. Any other, Mr. Childs?
I was going to say that it's probably not our biggest bang for a buck, but obviously supply and demand, you increase the supply and at least you can slow prices, or, at some point prices would go down. But do we want to just go over the things that we think that we can have staff write out something? So we've said the size, the minimum and maximum size, maybe the eliminating parking requirement of the ADU ordinance. Do we want to have them start writing some of those into a proposal and then review it next time, or I don't know?
In all fairness to the staff, I think they've got their hands full right now.
Right. I mean, maybe
So
not right now, but like at
We've
least
got to discuss it more and more.
And we want
just chip away. Years ago, when I was on this commission the first time in the 80s, that's when we developed the land development regulations. And we chipped away at it. It took 3 months. And then we presented it to the staff, who made some changes, gave their input, and then went to council. So we've got to take part in the discussion. That's why I suggested maybe, and the Sunshine Law applied back then, and 3 of us went together to Planning Commissioners Institute at Georgia Tech, rode in the same car, spent time, but we understood that we couldn't talk about things that were against the Sunshine Law, that were going to come up before the commission. Whether some of us go with the staff and council people to Orange County, I think we need to start doing research and with the staff, and then we're better prepared to have different set of ideas, whether it's ADUs, tiny homes, or anything like that. Mr. Basin.
Yeah, so, again, what Mr. Childs was saying, and again, I agree with you. Actually, a combination of the two is that at our next meeting, probably has some ideas on some topics that we've discussed, such as parking. Everyone comes and we discuss here at this forum what our ideas on this topic, and this topic, since we've had a chance to discuss this in general. And then back to the tiny homes just for a second again, because it's not this forum, but one of the ideas to lower the price of housing for those going forward is land trust.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if the city would get involved in land trust, which is, so the city owns the land, you build a home on it, which lowers the price of the home. Then inside the trust, the home is to be sold in perpetuity to someone who is low to moderate income. So that means when you buy the home, you can't sell it to the next person for money. For more money. You can only sell it to someone else who's inside your same situation at an affordable rate. Okay, so the city does have some land available to build on, and then again, for example, that can be tiny homes now or whatever. But one of the ideas again is a land trust that the city could get involved in. Now, again, that's not for today's topic. I just want to just put that out there to you guys. If you guys have never heard of a land trust or how to utilize one, that's one idea that can be done. Okay, and the word is perpetuity, in perpetuity. Alrighty. I love the idea of ADUs. I need to find out because I want to get one done, gentlemen and ladies, those that are present. I actually want one in my home, in my neighborhood, but I can't do it at 400 square foot or 600 square feet because I want more space myself because I'm the one that's going to be living in it. And so I love the fact that we're having these discussions. Once we get it to like at least 800 or 1,000 feet, I'll see if I can put one in the back of my house.
Mr. Perez.
Finally pull the trigger. Sort of I guess not going into the weeds here, but looking at it from 30,000 feet maybe. Our goal is low-cost housing or affordable, thank you. There are a lot of needs that we have, and I think we need to have as many options that we can construct realistically to make them available, okay? That will hopefully reduce the pressure, okay? Again, our goal is affordable housing. And the more we can siphon off into these other options, I think at least it'll help. I hate to be caught up here in Titusville in situations that you find elsewhere in the country where you have, homeless all over the place just because they never addressed it and none of these options exist. And it's a nightmare.
Any other, Mr. Aton?
So I guess this is for staff. Chairman Richard or Vice Chairman Richardson's comment about you guys are overstaffed, 100% agree. How do we go about it? In my mind, we're not starting from scratch. We got to point out the things that are not consistent with our thinking and propose changes. So can we get a Word version of the current code and start each one of us do red lines and try to compare it to, what the good material you provided and say, well, this piece of this document makes sense to me. Our code says 400 and, it should be a percentage based of the main dwelling unit or whatever our thoughts are, but to facilitate not saying, go figure it out and come back to us and tell us, what, which is how we normally do things.
Sure. So I would not recommend that each of the commissioners grab a copy and start redlining because that's just untangling Christmas lights at that point, trying to get everyone on the same page. I would say, we can look into a possible field trip or visiting another community or bring some other ordinances forward or staff could look at them and see if there's something else that we're missing. But I think I've heard some of the direction that you'd like to go in as far as some changes you'd like to see to our current ordinance. So we could put together, rather than doing the actual text of the code and of the ordinance, maybe a presentation or big picture, what are the concepts that are included and that you would like to see changed, like building sizes and other restrictions, and then we can address it kind of line by line, which topic you want to address. I don't know how long that would take. We may need to start, at the next meeting and knock out a couple things that we can get some consensus on and then move forward from there. But I think that would be my recommendation is if there's additional information that you need to make this decision, I think we need to hear that from you so that we can provide that to you. We provided Palm Bay's ordinance as an example and the cities to compare it to. If there's other communities that you'd like to have at your disposal to compare, please let us know. We can provide that. And then give us a chance to provide some, a format that we can all kind of, the staff can present to you and you can debate which topics you think need to be changed in the ordinance.
I would encourage all members to take a look at that webinar that Eddie resent me from the Florida Housing Coalition.
Mm-hmm.
It takes about an hour and a half, but they don't interview, people from different counties make the presentations. And one thing they do is they divide it into financing ADUs and selling ADUs to the community, having community meetings, especially the lady from Pinellas County. She had 3 lists of community meetings to sell the idea of ADUs. And I think that's something you need to look at, that webinar, if you can resend it to the other members. Take a look at the webinar, and then the possibility of a field trip over Orange County or Seminole County or Osceola County made the list also. But I think Orange County is the most forward looking, Orlando particularly. And then we'll slowly go about deciding how we move forward. Mr. Aton.
So I understand the field trip for the tiny home communities and
Well,
affordable housing. How do you do a field trip for accessory dwelling units where you're going into somebody's backyard to look at one structure or whatever?
No, it's like we'll talk to the staff and they'll show us examples of ADUs.
Okay.
And then we can visit a tiny home community. They're separate.
Okay. Yeah. It's that was my thing. Is
Yeah.
are we doing them? But from my standpoint, the things that have been most helpful in the past from our materials is like the tables. So the things that you've done or staff's prepared that say, this is what the code currently says. This is what Palm Bay says. This is what the AARP one says, and look for on this particular line item some parking, square footage, connection to utilities, the look or code or those kind of things that, I think there's like probably 6 or 8 themes in here that are probably the things that are standing in the way of broad adoption that we just need to come to some consensus on. And then from what I heard from watching what council said about this is that's what they're looking for is some recommendation that this is how it needs to change and why it needs to change.
They don't want another 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock meeting.
Yeah.
Mr. Grodd.
One more comment, because I believe that's the correct direction to have staff work on illustrating how you would have some changes. More specifically, as I began, I mentioned the statute that describes what the local ordinance is supposed to have in it. When I read what you gave from Titusville's code, I noticed that's absent. So that's one example where, like it or not, unless that statute's not in effect, you're supposed to have an ordinance that says you're supposed to sign an affidavit. And not that an affidavit's not going to say that I didn't lie, but I lied, but it certainly entices somebody to know they're supposed to be considering affordability. When you look at prohibitations, if you're going to make the owner live at the site where you got this, you're right there. You've got to take one of two people. If somebody's a renter and lives in a home, and the owner moved and they have a accessory dwelling, so there's two rental properties there. I'm not sure you want to stop somebody's ability to rent. And the other comment was going back to the folks in the audience and this notion, I don't want to say it wrong, so don't misunderstand me, but the Desi and Lucy picture of the mobile home, it was illustrating in my mind what people fear is going to get parked
Yeah.
next to their house they've spent $500,000 on. If you, on the other hand, look at those codes, I'm forgetting what it says on the side of mine, RIAA or something. It's the codes for how you construct those things, ANSI codes. That's the codification reference you'd want to have in your ordinance so that you don't have the 1950 mobile home potentially coming in because it's on wheels. It can't because it doesn't meet those standards. It doesn't have that seal. And the current ordinance in Titusville Municipal Code, it doesn't let you use, as it says, or similar vehicle as an accessory dwelling. Right there kills it, because someone, I'm sure in staff, will say, if it's got wheels like wings, it's duck. I think you need to address that and at least let the staff, if they can, offer, maybe there's an example out there where they aren't prohibiting the use of tiny homes which are on wheels from tiny homes which are constructed on site versus site constructed buildings. Again, the affordability is, and I didn't maybe express it right for me, it's affordable for the owner that wants to invest in doing that. Whether it's for my mom and she passed away and now I got a little extra income, or I've got some friends visiting so they can stay. Whatever the protocol is, that should be me in my decision, because that's why I put it out there. The market will dictate how much you pay for rent, and the rent goes up. But if you sign the affidavit, you got to keep it in the back of your mind that you're supposed to make it affordable. So it's kind of like building a patchwork of rules that get you that direction of, and I don't think affordability is tiny homes and subdivisions. Affordability is also affordable for making those accessory dwellings user-friendly, especially for the owner. I wished I could do it, actually, but I can't because it won't fit.
I think ADUs and tiny homes are just two examples. I'm reminded of Mr. Faison every time a rezoning comes up. How many units are going to be affordable?
Yes.
And they say it'll be a market rate. Well, maybe, and I know people that later hear this, or their hair's going to set on fire. Maybe we need to establish that 10% or 5% of any kind of new development has got to be affordable housing.
Yes. Yes.
I know, but
Yes.
that's got to be a thing that we consider.
Well, I guess especially if they're building X amount of homes. So let's say if you have a development that's, let's use the number of 100. If you're building a 100-home community, you can't make 5% to 10% affordable home. I mean, they can, because here's my problem, right? Any of us can go to Home Depot with a plan that you download offline. Just put a square footage. All you want is a square foot home of, say, 2,000 square feet. Take a building plan, go to Home Depot, and Home Depot will tell you how much it costs to build that home. It's not $300,000. It's not $400,000 what they're selling these homes for. So they're making a profit. They're making a substantial profit that they can give the city back something. And we're not asking for me. We're asking for the city. Okay, give back to the city. But that's just my personal opinion. I think that's a great idea. I think something we can at least, if we believe in what we believe in, put it forth. And if anybody, I'll put that forth. Real quickly, I was out for Bike Week. I was heading down to Daytona, slid by the Bucky's. Have you guys seen the Bucky's?
Oh, yeah.
Yet? All right. So just behind Bucky's, there was traffic on the road, so I decided to take that road just past Bucky's and make that left to kind of try to bypass the traffic on 95. Make a long story short, I came across a small community called the Cottages of Daytona Beach. It looked like a huge tiny home community. It was beautifully laid out. I'm on the website right now. It's called the Cottages of Daytona Beach. They have homes anywhere from 546 square feet up to 1,400 square feet. So, I mean, when I look at these as examples of tiny homes, these are examples of very, very beautiful places. Huh? Yeah, yep, yes. Well, that's the other side. But what I'm saying is that because they're probably not affordable, okay? They're probably not affordable, right? But what I'm saying is that people can build affordable homes that look beautiful. They can build tiny homes that look beautiful. That's not an eyesore in the community. And so again, so the cottages right here, Daytona Beach. If you want to drive through, I was very impressed. I was like, this place looks beautiful. They had garages, and it was a beautifully laid out community. And so, you know, when I see this, I see that it is possible. A tiny home community in Titusville is possible, but we got to make. I think in some ways we have to make the developers do stuff that they don't want to do. And I mean, Titusville is like a pot of gold for these guys. Okay? They know that the space program is here. They know people are coming here. They know they're going to have a captive audience. All they have to do is just get us to approve their building plans. Well, I think in some way, if we can, we need to get something back from them.
Yeah, and even if they've got to ask 10% more
Yeah.
of the houses that are not affordable to make up for the
Yeah.
affordable houses, it's not that difficult. Any other discussion? Okay, what we'll do is I would ask y'all to look at the video that Eddie sent and dwell on the subject. And if it's the next meeting or the following one that's not a full agenda, we'll discuss it again. Okay? Okay.
Can I just add one thing to this
Yes.
conversation? I've been doing a bit of research during this conversation, and I do see that there is proposed state legislation. I'm not sure if Member Faison is aware of the proposed Live Local Act of 2023. It is a state legislation that's
Live
proposed to provide tax incentives for local governments who create, there's a lot to it, so I'd like to give myself a little more time to read it and then provide a copy of the proposed legislation to this body, because I think that on a state level, these legislators are recognizing that there's a need for affordable housing. It passed the Senate and it's in the House as of yesterday, so it's relatively current
Good.
events that I'd like to share with you. So it's inspiring that I've been reading this. There's other things that I found that I sent some to Eddie. I'd like to thank the members of the audience who informed us about the NOAA Certified. That's a organization that is specific to tiny house on wheels. So I know that we've all gathered a lot of information tonight, and I just wanted to chime in while I have this in front of me to let you all know that I'm looking for more information and that we will provide it to you either by email or through an agenda packet.
Outstanding. Any other discussion on the ADUs here?
Yeah, I have a question for Eddie, and I apologize not being familiar. Does Titusville have a Section 8 housing department within the organization?
We have a neighborhood services department.
Just throw that out there. It may be beneficial at some point where you're discussing this, that the folks who administer those grants for affordable housing, although they don't do it like they used to for developments of regional impact, they used to require developers to set aside and pay into a fund that was utilized by local government. I can tell a story, but I don't need to. Just the simple fact is it gets transferred to someplace else. And try to put it in a frame. So you may have heard of the community celebration of the Disney development. So they didn't really want those kind of people to be living in celebration, those people being lower income people. So they didn't want to have to integrate into their neighborhoods any affordable housing, even though the rules on DRIs required them to do it. So they just wrote a check and built an apartment complex in the city of Kissimmee. And then they were required to subsidize that, so rental was under market rent. And that's not a new story. The oldest story is, if you've been in Central Florida, there's a place for years called Snow White Village. It was on 192. So if you can picture going to Disney in 72, there was nothing on 192, no gift shops, no anything. Disney worked with a mobile home park operator, Snow White Mobile Home Park, and that was where all the Disney cast members were able to rent the mobile homes, and recreational vehicles were in there at an affordable rate. And that was their incentive to get people that didn't have to drive from Titusville to Orlando to work. They were driving from 535 to work in Disney, only a 15-mile drive. So the reason I mention that is maybe some discussion along affordable housing that's provided for currently could be integrated into whatever we come up with as new rules for accessory dwellings, or even maybe go past that into tiny housing subdivision rules or something.
Yes, and we usually have a member that's on the Affordable Housing Committee. That's is me right now. And maybe we need to get Terry Franklin to come to the next meeting where we discuss it, because in one of the presentations, I saw that Section 8 vouchers can be used for ADUs.
You know, that's exactly why this is lit up, to let you guys know. If you guys didn't know, and this has been on the books for years, that the Section 8 allows people that are on housing choice voucher to be able to use that that Section 8 voucher to purchase a home. Now, the problem with that is in the state of Florida, only a few states allowed it to happen, and in Brevard County, they don't allow one person to do that. Okay, so it's called the PHP. I don't know what that stands for, but the PHP is who governs Brevard County's Section 8. It's out of Miami, and they are not allowing people to use their Section 8 vouchers to purchase homes. That is the number one great way to get people to buy homes, because Section 8 voucher is what it is. That's $800, $1,300 that they can put towards the purchase of a home. So depending on your family size, depending on how much your voucher is worth, that's great money to be used towards homes. It's going to take some advocacy from folks, not just the government, but from individuals, to get to them, because people don't know that you can use your Section 8 voucher. You can look it up. It's called the Section 8 housing choice voucher, or the Section 8 home buying program. The government has allowed you to use your Section 8 voucher to buy a home, but for some reason here in the state of Florida, not all the counties are doing it. For example, Osceola County is the first one I can think of. Pinellas. Pinellas County is the number one county that I know of right now that allows it to happen in the state of Florida. Yes.
Okay, are we clear about what we need to do before the next meeting where we can discuss it? Okay, before we go on to staff reports, we need to have some self-introductions where you tell us something about you, since we have several new people on the commission. And we'll start with Lori Dargy.
I'm Lori. I started with the city in 2008 under code enforcement. I was with them for 5 years, and then I moved to the planning and zoning department. And I've been doing these meetings for 10 years.
Bless your soul.
Thank you.
Mr. Perez. You got to turn the mic. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I left it on. Let's see, I've been with this group just about a year, I think. And also with TEC, I'm on my second term with them. I'm a retired pharmacist. Okay, I used to work for the federal government, Food and Drug Administration, and also, worked in hospitals and whatnot. I think that's it, unless there's something else you want me to say.
Tell us something that we don't know about you. Positive, not negative.
Positive?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I used to be an alpaca breeder. Okay. What's that? No. There's a story to that, though. Okay, there's a story to that. Yeah. Llamas, in particular, have attitude, yes.
Mr. Grodd.
Well, the short of it is I came to Titusville with my parents in 1957 and moved to New Titusville by the high school. and graduated from Titusville High School. Went away to college, went away to a career, and then decided I would retire back when I asked myself, why would I want to look around the country when I can live in a home, I can be at the beach in 12, 15 minutes, I can be north and south and east and, well, not really east, but west conveniently. I like the neighborhood I grew up in. It's still the same neighborhood. I actually still have 1 or 2 people left from the original owners that were there. They're almost 100 now. My father was 98 when he passed away, so longevity, I don't think will be my strong suit, but it was for my dad and my mom. My career was spent in local government, mostly in county government, Osceola County specifically. And then I went on to different things over time and worked for city governments. City of St. Cloud was my last gig when I decided to finally retire. And when the opportunity came to join the Titusville Planning and Zoning Commission, I kind of said, why not? For most of my career, I was Eddie, and I got to answer all the questions and had not enough hands to put the fires out. And so I thought maybe I could help assist the city as best I can from some of my experiences.
Mr. Grant.
Well, my story is boring, I suppose. After high school, I grew up in Georgia, by the way, southeast Georgia. Bulldogs.
Roll Tide.
Okay. You want me to say that again? No, I'll let you go. I'll wait till the season starts. Anyway, after high school, I joined the Air Force. Spent my stint in the Air Force, and after that, I get out and trying to determine what I wanted to do with my life. And I decided to go to a trade school, believe it or not, in Tampa, and to study electronics, computer engineering technology, be exact. And I have been very fortunate. I've only worked one real job my entire life. After I graduated from school over in Tampa, I came over here. Actually, I got a job over here before I came here at the Space Center. And as an electronic technician, came up through the ranks all the way up to management when I spent 30 plus years doing something that I absolutely loved. And the only thing that bothers me is that I missed the last 2 launches. I was there for all of them except the last 2. And that's a nightmare there. But I've been very fortunate. Very fortunate. And after I retired, I decided I wanted to do something to try to get back to the city, because I moved here to Titusville because I thought it was a great place to raise kids. And it is until they get a little older, and then there's nothing for them to do, and then they get into trouble. But I moved here in 82, excuse me. And I've been here ever since. And now I want to get back. That's why I was on code enforcement for a while.
With me. Yeah.
And this gentleman talked me into coming over to planning and zoning, which I absolutely love. I was telling my wife not too long ago, I would like to come back here in, say, 20 years and see what seeds that we've sowed, with all the stuff that we do here, especially the Searstown Mall deal. I'm really looking forward to that being developed. And Horizons. What's happening with Horizons, man? You gonna start breaking ground on that thing or what? Anyhow,
It's on the horizon.
but anyhow,
It looks like he won't comment.
yeah, he's a big dog. But anyway, that's it really. That's my story.
Well, I was born in a small town in Georgia, Atlanta. We moved here in 1967. And in fact, I was here at the dedication of this building because my mom, who's watching us tonight, typed the specs for this building to be built. And I was lucky enough to be elected to council 7 days after my 21st birthday. And that was, I won't tell you what year it was, but former Chairman Severs swore me in as a member of council. And I've been on planning and zoning before, housing authority, code enforcement, and now back to P&Z. But in that time, I got my bachelor's in administrative science from the University of Alabama. And I have a master's degree in HR. And I was hired to do supply chain management. My last assignment was when I was in charge of eliminating chemical weapons at both Anniston and Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and Umatilla, Oregon. I had 148 people working for me. And we were given an incentive to destroy those weapons. And when we finally destroyed them, I had a stroke. That was 10 years ago. And I'm lucky to be back. I'm lucky that not be in a nursing home. And even though I sometimes slur my speech, my mind is still a steel trap.
So I'm Dan Ayton. Moved to Titusville from Indiana in 1973. Hoosier. Columbus, Indiana. And went to Astronaut High School and graduated from there in 77. Sorry, I got one kid.
No wonder you're wearing maroon.
I got one kid that's still at Titusville High School. She's the first Titusville High School child. I'm an old dad. I got a 15-year-old at home, but I've got 4 other kids and 4 grandkids. Moved away from Titusville, had a couple businesses here, worked for a business, moved out west for 8 years, moved back to Orlando, and lived over there in Deltona for 10 or so years, and then moved back to Titusville. I walk to these meetings, live on the river, and own a business here in Titusville. My have 9 years in June, and we do sports technology. So I'm a geek. And before that, had a business in Orlando, also sports technology. So I sit on the Economic Development Zone Board, this board, one of the smaller hospital boards, used to be on the Y board, had to give something up, and run a business and try to raise a family. So,
Mr. Payson.
Oh, wow. So, born and raised right here. My family, well, my father's side of the family moved to Titusville in 1912, so the Faisons have been here for quite some time. While in high school, I played football and wrestling and in the band, marching band. Left here and was gone for almost 20 years. Traveled all over the place. Went to Arkansas, lived there for a year. And I said that when I ever get back to Florida, I won't ever leave. So I moved back to Florida in 2017. Got a job over at Lockheed. I am a systems engineer for Lockheed by day, and I do this at night. I'm an entrepreneur. I've had a couple of businesses, looking at starting my next one now. But most importantly, though, none of those things matter. What's real important to me is the fact that I've always wanted to do something for my city. Being that I was born here, was raised here, I love this place, and I want to do whatever I can to make the city better. So this is my second stint on planning and zoning, P&Z. The first time I was lost in the sauce, didn't know what they were talking about. I was like, what's a CUP? You know, the whole 9 yards. But anyways, my previous job took me a lot of traveling. So because of the travel, I went ahead and quit. I thought I wasn't doing the board any justice, the commission any justice by being gone as much. But I missed it. I missed being participating in local government, participating in being an agent of change. And so I came back. And now that I'm back, I hope that while I'm up here, I'm representing my community. And I hope that I make everyone in the city of Titusville proud by speaking for them. And I pray that I'm speaking for them. And if I'm not, please let me know. I will speak for you. Because it's not about me. It really is about our city.
Mr. Childs.
I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri, or if you're from there, you say Missouri for whatever reason, I don't know. But I was a healthcare IT consultant, which means I helped configure electronic medical records. I did programming and configured it for physicians, and I traveled all over. I worked for Johns Hopkins, NYU Lincoln. I was flying from here to Cedars Sinai in Beverly Hills, California, and I wanted to get off the road. And actually, I moved down. Since I started traveling, I could live wherever I wanted to. I moved to Cocoa Beach originally, and then I was like, that's just too touristy. And then so 2009, I moved up here to Titusville, and I loved it. I moved away to Miami Beach to do a job down there, and then I came back, and my wife's from my current wife is from South Carolina, a little town in South Carolina called Aiken, and I showed her Titusville, and she's like, "This reminds me of my little town in South Carolina," and I was like, "All right, cool, let's build have a house built," and so we have a house built here, and I loved it. I loved it here. And so I wanted to do whatever I could to help, keep this going and keep, Titusville growing, but in a way that keeps its character, and, but I have 3 adult children, and then I have a 4-year-old, cause I got remarried, and, she never had a child. So I got a 4-year-old, but I have my son, my oldest, lives here in Titusville too. And I own a Christmas shop here at Titus Landing. I still do a lot of programming. I have a ticketing platform that I do all programming for and run, and most of our customers are out in Arizona, but I'd love to have some here. I'm just not the salesperson. My brother is, but and so I do that, and and that's about me. Yeah.
Chelsea.
I don't know where to start here, I guess. I grew up in New York, Albany, and moved down to Washington, D.C. for undergrad, and then moved to Florida in 2009 for law school. I was fortunate enough to have an internship with a law school professor of mine who became the city attorney for the city of Neptune Beach for my 3rd year of law school. And upon that experience, I applied for this job in 2013, got it. I interviewed in September of 2013, having never been to or heard of Titusville, Florida. And I remember going to the cobbler shop, the
Kloiber's Cobbler.
Yeah, for my first meal, and interviewing the restaurant employees and asking them about this city because I just didn't know anything about it. And started here the next month and bought my house in December 2014 when the housing prices were much lower than they are today. And I too also look at those Zillow pricing percentages that have gone up over year, and since when I bought my house, and I sympathize with those trying to buy and find somewhere to live these days because it is very difficult. So I'm interested to hear where this conversation continues that we had this evening.
And your daughter?
Yeah, I had a daughter last year. She's 9 months old.
Eddie?
My name is Eddie Galendo. I'm an AICP certified planner. Funny that you mentioned Kloiber's Cobbler Shop, because when I interviewed here, that's where I went to have my lunch, and the server said, "Here, I'm going to give you one of our frequent customer coupons. You're going to need it. You're going to get that job, and you'll be back." And that's what happened. I started with the city in 2014 after graduating from Florida State University with my master's in planning, and my bachelor's was in environmental studies. I too did not know much about Titusville. I flew over Titusville when I was visiting my dad who lives in Puerto Rico, and there was a launch going off while we were flying past it. Thought that was really cool, and also a really nice foreshadowing that I would be coming to Titusville. So love it here. Thanks.
Okay, I think we've gotten to know each other. One other thing before we get into the reports is Chairman Spidell's funeral will be 1 o'clock Saturday at St. Gabriel's. And I'll be there early because there's not much handicap parking. So if you want to sit with me, that's fine. I'll be towards the front of the church. If you can attend, that'd be wonderful. And the next meeting, we'll elect a new chairman. Think about it, who you'd like to be chairman, if you would like to be chairman. And would, Chelsea, we're gonna elect a chairman, and maybe if we have to elect a vice chairman at the end of the agenda or the beginning of the agenda.
I don't really mind where it goes on the agenda. It probably can be placed,
Probably at the end is better.
well, it has to go under either old or new business.
Okay.
So it'll be one of those two, and that's before whatever the other agenda items. Well, if it's new, we can put it on new business at the end.
Okay.
We'll do it that way.
Okay. City staff, your report.
No report.
How big will the agenda be at the next meeting?
I don't have the crystal ball out.
City attorney.
It looks like at the next meeting on April 5th, there will be a couple of CUPs and potentially an easement vacation and an ordinance. So 4 items, but nothing super controversial, it looks like. You know, famous last words.
We are governing by CUPs. I don't have any report. Any members have any report? Okay, we'll see you next time.